Okay, in this module we're going to start to have a little bit of fun with our stacking model. So currently this curved facade that we have on the front of the building is made up of arcs that are all the same. That's because when we created those arcs, we created a series of points which had a certain depth from the face of the building. Now we did create a slider for that depth, but a slider produces a constant value which we use to create a list of points, and therefore all the arcs are the same. But what if there is a way to make those arcs different and vary so we could actually get that facade to move in and out? So what if you could create something like a slider, but rather than a constant variable, you got a list of related values? So this is the purpose of a law curve. So we're going to create a law curve and we're going to replace that arc depth with the law curve. So I'm going to go to my node types. I'm going to go down to the utility nodes, and that's where I find the law curve node. And I'm going to drag and drop that onto my graph. I'll just double click that so we can see the properties. So a law curve is, click here, you can see there's a graph there. So it's basically a graph with an X and Y axis, and we're going to create a curve on the graph. So we consider the x-axis to be the independent variables and the y-axis to be the dependent variables. And you can see here that by default the independent variables are defined as a list of values. So it's just a list 0 through 10. We're going to leave that for now. We'll come back and modify that later. The number of controls refers to the points on the graph which are going to control the curve. The order is the order of the curve. And then we have a y-min and a y-max. So this would be the minimum and the maximum for our y values. Well, if you remember, we also had a minimum and a maximum on our arc depth, and we could actually just use the same values. So I'm going to set the minimum to 1. And we're going to set that max. If you remember, we took the depth of the site, which was 85 feet, and we subtracted out the width of the building, which is the y width variable. And then what we have left is the value we can make the arc depth. Then we do an x grid spacing, typically it would be 1, and a y grid spacing of 1. Then I'm going to come click on the graph again. So now you can see our values, our y values now go from 1 to 20. And now I'm just going to move these control points to create the curve on the graph. So maybe just something like that. And then I'm going to take that dependent variable, so that's the y value, and I'm going to link it back to the same place where we previously had linked the arc depth. It's actually still there, so I'm going to, this is the distance from, for the point on the arc, the distance from the origin. So let me link that in there. I'm going to probably have to open this up and adjust it. So we did, I'm going to take out the brackets here. So we had the y width and we added the arc depth. That's what I'm going to take out, and instead I'm going to add this law curve dependent variable. But this is no longer a constant value, it's a list of different values. So we'll select OK, and you'll see what just happened to that facade. Those arcs are now moving out and then back in. So let's go back and look at our graph, see exactly what happened. The values along the x-axis basically represent the indexing of the list. So the first member in the list is the index of 0. This next member is 1, 2, 3. And I can simply look at where the curve crosses the graph to determine what the y value is at that point. So the first value is going to be 5. The next value is about 10.5. Third value is about 14.5, and so on. And so those points that are forming the midpoint of the arc are moving out and then back in, just as our graph does.